The Alpha II is a new and improved version of Vvolt's entry-level city bike with a redesigned look and a more relaxed feel. So with these updates, is it still an alpha or more like a beta? Let's take a ride and find out. Welcome to Electric Bike Report, I'm John. We'll get to the Alpha II in a sec, but before we dive in, please do us a favor and make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you have notifications turned on. We pride ourselves in making the most comprehensive e-bike reviews out there, so if you're in the market for one, you won't want to miss our future content. And also, if this review helps you in your buying decision, we ask that you use our affiliate link in the video description when making your purchase to help support our channel at no additional cost. But on to the good stuff. I tested the original Alpha about a year ago, so I was looking forward to seeing what changed on the Alpha II. One of the first things that stood out to me was the bike's new design, and I think Vvolt really nailed it. The bike's down tube curves up and around when it hits the head tube, so there's a really clean look with the integrated headlight, and we haven't seen too many similar looking bikes out there. Once I hopped on the bike, a few other things stood out, mainly the bike's handling. The Alpha II weighs 45 pounds, including its motor and battery, so it's pretty light for an e-bike, and that helped it to feel really nimble, especially when combined with its 27.5 inch by 2.4 inch CST tires and its Dutch-style handlebars. Another thing that stood out was the Alpha's simple operation. The bike has a single-speed drivetrain, so there's no need to worry about shifting, and I found myself either bumping up to a high pedal assist setting when I wanted to get moving from a dead stop, or just using the throttle to get up to speed. But even better, the single-speed drivetrain uses a Gates carbon belt, so it's really quiet, it lasts far longer than a chain, and it doesn't need grease, so it's also a lot cleaner. So that covers a few of the big highlights, but let's finish off this section by running through the spec sheet. The Alpha II has a 350 watt rear hub motor made by Ananda, and that has a cadence sensor. It peaks at 550 watts and it has 45 newton meters of torque. There's a removable 36 volt, 374 watt hour battery in the down tube. That single speed drivetrain I mentioned uses a 118 tooth belt paired with a 50 tooth chainring and a 22 tooth cog on the freewheel. The bike comes equipped with a Shimano MT200 hydraulic disc brake system with 160mm rotors and dual piston calipers. It has an alloy fork with 3 pack mounts on each side as well as a through axle. And then I mentioned the integrated headlight, but there's also a tail light beneath the custom saddle. And then moving up to the cockpit, the handlebars are 720mm wide with ergonomic lock-on rubber grips. The bike has a central black and white display. There's a small control panel on the left handlebar and a throttle lever on the right next to the bell. And then a few final details. The Alpha II is a Class 2 e-bike with pedal assist and throttle up to 20 miles per hour. The battery is UL 2271 certified, and the bike itself is UL 2849 certified. It's available in 2 frame sizes at the time of filming, with a 3rd size coming in June of 2024. It has a standard weight capacity of up to 300 pounds, but it can hold even more with some modifications after you contact Vvolt. It's compatible with a handful of accessories, including fenders and a cargo rack, with more on the way. And then there are two-tone color options, a coral color called Reef, and the blue here, which is called Midnight Pearl. That wraps up the basics, so let's move on to our standardized tests and see how the Alpha II stacks up against other city bikes we've tested. We'll kick things off with our brake test, where we tested the bike's Shimano hydraulic brake system. Our tester Griffin brought the bike up to 20 miles per hour, and we measured the distance it took to stop after he hit the brakes. The average after 3 tests was 23 feet and 2 inches, which is pretty solid for the city bike category. Our current average for e-bikes of this style is 24 feet and 1 inch, so the Alpha II was almost a foot better than average, and we chalked that up to 2 things. First, the fact that these are Shimano brakes, which have generally performed well in this test, but second, the width of the tires seemed to help out too. We usually expect 2.4 inch wide tires on larger and heavier commuter e-bikes, and these seem to have really good grip that help to slow the bike down. I noticed that the Alpha could fishtail a bit when braking really hard, but that wasn't really anything out of the ordinary. Overall, the brakes felt great, and we're happy to say they're safe and effective. Next, I performed our speed test out on the bike paths by recording my maximum speed in each pedal assist setting. I also tested out the throttle to see how quickly it accelerates, so let's go check out those tests and then we can go over the results back here in the studio. All right, so we are starting off the speed test here with a little bit of a headwind. We'll see how much that affects things, but let's see, pedaling around 10.5 miles per hour with no assist. And I'll read off the numbers since I don't know if you're gonna be able to see the screen. But okay, we picked up a little bit more actually. We are going 11.5 miles per hour, 11.5, 11.6 was the max. So let's go ahead and go up to PAS 1. All right, you hear that motor engage. That was nice and smooth. It's definitely making a difference. Pedaling is a lot easier. So getting definitely an increase in speed. So we're going 13.9 right now, up to 14. Still climbing a little bit. All right, 14.1, we'll call it there. Let's go up to PAS 2. Definitely getting some wind. We'll see if we can overcome that. So I'm noticing here around 15 miles per hour, just with my preferred cadence, it's starting to ghost pedal a little bit. So I'm just gonna kind of relax into that and let the bike do its thing. But we're still picking up some speed here, going 17 miles per hour. Still climbing. All right, 17 point, no, we hit 18. All right, so we'll call it there. Let's go up to PAS 3. All right, still climbing, getting pretty speedy. We're going 19.6. Yep. All right, let's go up to PAS 4. Got a little bit more to go yet. So it looks like 19.8 has been the max here. And then in PAS 5, let's see if we can hit 20. No, not quite. I think that's the headwind we have going on here. But yeah, okay, 19.8, we'll call it there. And let's go check out the throttle. All right, so let's try out the throttle and see how quickly it can hit 20 miles per hour. We'll start in 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so that is the safe speed. So we're only getting 80% of the max output. Pretty gradual build here, but it is picking up. All right, we're up to 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Let's run through those numbers again to get an idea of the bike's power distribution. I pedaled up to 11.6 miles per hour with no assist, and then moving up through the 5 power levels, I hit 14.1 miles per hour in PAS 1, 18 in PAS 2, 19.6 in PAS 3, and then 19.8 in both PAS 4 and 5, but I did hit 20 outside of this test when I wasn't fighting a headwind. So that cluster of similar speeds starting at PAS 3 stood out as a little bit odd. We usually like to see a much more evenly balanced distribution of speeds and power levels, but bikes with single speed drivetrains are notoriously difficult to balance, and I think that's why Vvolt programmed the Alpha the way that they did. You want to be able to pedal effectively both on flat ground and on hills, so the Alpha's low power settings seem to be geared toward the former, and its high power settings toward the latter. I learned after this test that that's exactly how Vvolt markets this bike, and I think it works pretty well overall. With that in mind, I mentioned that I started feeling some ghost pedaling as I was getting up to speed in PAS 2, so I had to pedal uncomfortably fast to keep up with the speed of the bike, and that suggests that this bike could use a larger chainring. This smaller size helped out a bit on hills, as we'll talk about later, but I'd prefer to be able to step up to at least PAS 4 without ghost pedaling on a single speed bike. As you can see, the throttle was very gradual in its acceleration. It's programmed with 80% of the max power output from the motor. Our contact at Vvolt said that this was an intentional choice for 3 reasons. So first, they wanted to encourage pedaling as the main method of use. Second, this setup helps to extend battery life when using a throttle. And third, they wanted the power level to be really safe and accessible to everyone. I appreciate that Vvolt programmed it with safety in mind, but I do think it could use a little extra pickup. I know that might seem like quite a bit of critique, so I want to balance that out by saying that I did really like how zippy this bike felt. I prefer active pedaling, so I actually found the lowest setting to be the most enjoyable when I was riding on flat ground, and I think the bike's 350 watt motor was a great choice for the bike's size and weight. We tested the Alpha II's battery life in our range test by riding in PAS1 and PAS5 until we drained the battery. We traveled 22.7 miles with the highest assist level and 35.6 miles with the lowest, and our tests lasted 1 hour and 21 minutes and 2 hours and 57 minutes. At the time of filming, our data shows an average of about 24 to 38 miles based on the city bikes we've tested previously, so the Alpha ended up just slightly below average in comparison, but A, there's more to the picture, and B, average means good, and it's important to keep that in mind. I think the main reason this bike placed where it did was the fact that it uses a cadence sensor. We've seen a lot of similar bikes over the last year with torque sensors, which are naturally more efficient than cadence sensors as they allow the motor's output to vary instead of being a constant maximum flow. But it's worth mentioning that the Alpha's motor was about 26% more efficient than we expected based on its specs. In our speed test, we saw that this bike can be super effective in its lower assist settings, so I think there's a good chance most riders will be able to get closer to the high end of our results as long as you're not dealing with a lot of hills. So overall, I think the Alpha II did a pretty solid job here, even if we didn't quite reach the 45-mile range that Vvolt advertises. And now for our fan favorite, the hill test at Hellhole Trail. Our tester Justin tried out the Alpha II's throttle and its highest pedal assist setting on this monster of a hill that has a 12% average grade over 1/3 of a mile. Let's see what happened, and then I'll meet you back here in the studio to go over the results.
We are on the Vvolt Alpha, and it's a lightweight bike, not a super powerful motor with a belt drive. Usually does not spell good for the throttle test on Hellhole. And I don't think it's gonna change that. We will see. I'm down to 3.9, 3.8. Unless this has some serious like low end torque at low speeds, I don't think it's gonna make it up. But to be honest, it's farther than I thought it would be. So we've been just kind of holding at 3.6. I don't think this is the little engine that could. I really don't, but we'll see. If it gets through this next section, I will be shocked. Down to 2.7, 2.4, and I'm gonna call it. Yeah, so made it about a little bit farther than I expected. Again, lightweight bike, lower power rear hub motor with the belt drive. Doesn't usually spell good for the throttle test, but let's turn around and pedal and see how it does. Okay, we are back out on the Vvolt Alpha and doing the pedal test now. Again, it's a single gear rear hub, not incredibly powerful. More of a natural riding type experience on this. So we'll see how it does. So far it feels pretty good. I'm not pedaling incredibly hard. Right at 9, 9.7, 9.0, 8.6. Having to press a little bit more here, but nothing like a regular bike. As you can tell as I'm talking, I'm not breathing hard. So yeah, dropped about 8.5 through there. The motor is very quiet, very nice feel to it, very natural. Let you listen to it through this section here. So you probably couldn't even hear that. Got down again about 8.6, 8.7 through that section. So it's not going to be a barn burner, but very natural feel. Again, these lighter weight Dutch style bikes are meant to be more read like a classic bicycle, and I like that feel. Yeah, you'll put on a little bit more going up a hill, but it did make it up Hellhole. And let's go to the tape and let's see how it compares to other similarly spec'd and similar style bikes.
So of course, the Alpha didn't make it up the path on throttle, but it did a really solid job in the pedal test. Justin finished that portion in 1 minute and 39 seconds with an average speed of 11 miles per hour. The bike's throttle results were honestly no surprise considering the 350 watt motor. We haven't tested any bike with a motor of that size that's been successful with its throttle at Hellhole. That steep section where the Alpha gave out is just a little too tough for this relatively low amount of power. The pedal results are pretty interesting though. So we talked about how the Alpha II's cadence sensor was somewhat of a weakness in our range test section, but I think it was actually an advantage in this test. That constant steady flow of motor output pushed beyond most of the other bikes we've tested with 350 watt rear hubs. So this bike came out 19 seconds faster than average. And it came in behind just one other bike that had almost double the torque, so the Alpha's looking pretty good in the big picture. As Justin was saying, you definitely still have to pedal this bike and put in a little effort, but the motor makes a huge difference. I tested the Alpha at our secondary location that's only a little less intense than Hellhole and found that I could pedal up even in PAS 3 without being out of breath. And of course the job only got easier with the higher assist settings. The Alpha's throttle was actually successful at that location too, so that just goes to show that you shouldn't have much trouble on average to large hills. And even if you've got something extreme like Hellhole, the Alpha will pedal up just fine. The ride quality of a bike takes a whole bunch of things into account, like sizing, style, comfort, and the overall pedal experience. Let's go back out with the Alpha II one more time and talk about some of those major elements, and then I'll see you back here in the studio to dive in a little deeper. So the Alpha II is kind of what we call a city cruiser. So it has that lightweight frame and these curved Dutch style handlebars, and it's pretty nimble and agile. It also has a pretty upright riding position. I've got a little bit of a forward lean going on, but it's still really comfortable. So my arms are pretty outstretched and my hands are pretty low. But I do want to point out that this frame size, this is the medium, and I am technically too tall for that based on the sizing. So the large frame should be coming out in June from what I read, and that should fit me a little bit better. But the upside of this being a little bit smaller is that it definitely does feel a little extra nimble and a little bit more fun. So I'm having a good time. But in any case, there's no suspension that comes standard on the bike. This is a rigid frame, but I'd say that the tires are doing a lot of work. These are 27.5 inch by 2.4. They're made by CST. And so just with that width, you get really good riding stability and a little extra cushion when you're going over bumps. And then of course we have a 350 watt rear hub motor with a cadence sensor. So, you know, in the grand scheme, that's not a lot of power, but it's plenty for this bike. It feels nice and zippy. I mean, right now I'm in PAS 1 and it feels really great. I could bump up to PAS 5, you know, to get a lot of power from it, but I just really don't need that. So you do have those different power levels for handling hills and whatnot. But yeah, a lot of fun, pretty quick handling, and all around a good time. So let's jump back to the studio and wrap things up. So the Alpha II has a little more of a relaxed riding position than you'll typically find with city bikes, and that's mostly because of the Dutch style handlebars. I liked the feel overall, but as I said, the large frame would likely have been a bit better suited to my height. So the small frame is recommended for riders between 5 feet tall and 5'6". The medium that we have is for those from 5'5" to 5'11", and then the large goes from 5'8" to 6'3". I'm not sure if you could tell from that clip, but the black and white display was pretty tough to read in direct sunlight. I went in and bumped up the brightness to its maximum setting, but I didn't really notice any real improvement, so I'd recommend Vvolt use a more visible screen on the next version of the bike, and I think a color display would be great considering the Alpha II's price point between $1,500 and $2,000. I'd also like to see a tail light that functions as a brake light, especially considering that this is the kind of bike that's likely spending some time around other bikes and cars on the road. The integrated front headlight is great, and I like the little side vents that add some nighttime visibility, but I think the other end of the bike could use some attention too. Otherwise, I hope you could tell how much I liked riding this bike. It was zippy and playful and fun, and it was also a really nice contrast from some of the big, heavy, fat tire e-bikes that we see a lot of. I'm usually a really big fan of city bikes, and I really liked that the Alpha II was a different take on that style. It was more relaxed and ergonomic than I'm used to, it had the great handling that I hoped for, and overall I think it did a solid job in our testing. Looking back over its results, there are some natural limitations to a single-speed drivetrain that came into play in our speed test, and I'd like to see Vvolt bump up the chainring size to reduce or eliminate ghost pedaling. And then the bike's cadence sensor showed a couple of interesting trade-offs in our range and hill tests. We learned that this bike is a better hill climber than most of its peers, and it can cover quite a lot of ground, especially if you like to pedal actively. There are a couple of other areas with room for improvement, like the tail light and the display, but otherwise we think the Alpha II would be a great choice for anyone looking for a bike that's easy to use, that looks really cool, and that's relatively light and nimble. It would make a good commuter just as much as a fun leisure bike, but it also has some adventuring potential thanks to the mounts on the fork. So if you think this might be the bike for you, you can head over to Vvolt's website using one of the links in the video description. If you want to check out our written review for this bike or any others, there's another link to electricbikereport.com. But thanks for tuning in. Let us know what you think about this one down in the comments section, and please consider giving us a like if you haven't already. But that's all for today. Again, I'm John with Electric Bike Report, and this is the Vvolt Alpha II.